creationism makes sense. And there was a person called Harun Yahya, and he was a Turkish Muslim person, whatever. And he wrote quite a lot of different books on debunking evolution and stuff like that. And Darwinism, he was kind of against it. Darwinism, the theory of evolution, right? He was kind of more favoring creationism, right? Specifically because he was from a Muslim background, so he was kind of favoring Islamic creationism. But anyway, right, he kind of made a lot of good arguments for as to why creationism is probably a lot more compelling and true compared to just like coincidental evolution, right? Spontaneous evolution, the idea that mankind emerged from just chaos and came together for no reason. Essentially, right? We became ordered and we essentially became more complex, but it was completely spontaneous and for no reason. It was a sort of blind evolutionary process, right? That wasn't being inspired by anyone. And Harun Yahya, he was kind of heavily arguing against this and stuff. I just wanted to kind of cover a lot of the arguments he said, right? Because he was essentially saying, evolution. Like, let's just assume, right, that there's some type of fish creature in like some type of pond area or whatever. Right? This fish creature, right? Let's just assume, right, that it's attempting to climb out of the pond, but it hasn't fully evolved its lungs yet and stuff. Harun Yahya argued that this fish creature, right, immediately would just pass away. There would be no in the theory, like a lot of people that believe in the theory of evolution, they claim that fish, they slowly and carefully adapted out of the ocean, and then they kind of start to adapt onto the land, and then their lungs start to develop and stuff, and then they became smaller creatures that crawled around on the floor and stuff, and then they became kind of like the predecessors to dinosaurs and mammals and modern life forms, etc. Modern animals, essentially, right? And that's kind of, this is like, people who believe in the theory of evolution, this is what they kind of believe, right? That it was possible for these different creatures, these different prehistoric animals, to kind of transition carefully into their next stage of evolution and stuff. And Harun Yahya was kind of heavily arguing that this is just complete nonsense. Because let's just again assume there's this little fish creature in the pond, right? If it tries climbing out of that pond, let's just assume that it hasn't evolved any type of lungs yet, right? That can handle air and stuff. That fish creature, there would be no transition. It wouldn't be able to transition to the next stage of its evolution, right? Because they would immediately pass away, all of its offspring, right? But even if they for some reason their genetics were a little bit more weirded out, right? They inherited some type of quirk in their genetics, and this made it so that they can kind of handle the air a little bit more. That wouldn't still work, because they would still die. The macro evolution, right? This a species turning into evolving to these different stages of evolution and stuff. That's kind of completely unsubstantiated and stuff like that, right? We don't have any kind of demonstrable evidence, right? That a species can drastically change and adapt to a completely alien environment, right? That's what the Darwinian theory of evolution suggests, right? That's what a lot of people who believe in the theory of evolution, that's what they kind of claim, right? There was this dramatic change, and some type of prehistoric animal in the ocean, right? Completely changed its biology, came out of the ocean, then it turned into the ancestor of all of us mammals and other types of creatures and stuff. This is kind of, Harun Yahya was arguing that this is literally impossible, right? It was because if that small creature in the pond or whatever, if it tried escaping from its environment, right, getting into some type of more some other type of area and whatever, right, climbing out of its natural habitat, it would just fail. It would essentially die. There would be no transition, right? It hasn't been demonstrated that a species can completely adapt and change and survive in a completely new environment and stuff without any type of assistance, right? Especially because we're assuming that in the beginning of our history, right, that these prehistoric creatures, they for whatever reason, right, they were capable enough on their own, purely through blind chance, of kind of adapting and surviving, again, just purely off of blind chance. And it's kind of ridiculous. And Harun Yahya was kind of bringing it all the way further back to the to the beginning of the genesis of the earth, right? life, abiogenesis. He was kind of arguing how absurd abiogenesis is, right? That life, something can come from nothing. It's never been demonstrated. It's not observable at all. If you kind of, and a lot of people, evolutionary biologists or scientists or acclaimed academics, they would kind of come at me and say, yes, it is possible that abiogenesis is completely reasonable and stuff. Oh, is it reasonable, right? Do you have any type of demonstrable proof for abiogenesis, that life can emerge from nothing? Do you have demonstrable proof? Because it's never been observed. Science is about observation, right? Have we ever observed life emerging from nothing? Life just spontaneously generating itself, right? Of course not, right? It's never been seen in the history of man, right? In our history, we can see like life emerge from nothing. Right? Nothing, something could come from nothing. That's never been observed. Abiogenesis, like it's kind of at the root. It's the foundation of the theory of evolution, right? It's a belief. It's not a fact because it's never been observed. In our history, that essentially creatures, like life can just spontaneously emerge and become more complex. That's never ever been observed and stuff like that, right? So that it's a type of belief, right? Abiogenesis also is, at the foundation of the theory of evolution. It's kind of at the root of the theory of evolution, right? The idea that, essentially life can just purely off of blind chance, purely off of coincidence, spontaneous, just kind of completely randomly, just kind of emerge for no reason and become more complex and, to lead to where we are now and stuff. That's completely unsubstantiated, this idea of abiogenesis and stuff. And Harun Yahya was carefully articulating himself and proving that this is true, that, the theory of evolution is kind of, the macro evolution, because a lot of people, you can easily argue, well, microevolution, careful, like species can easily, in slight ways, reasonable ways, they can adapt and change their biological features to become more accustomed to like newer environments, right? The macroevolution, this dramatic change in biology for different creatures and animals, this kind of hasn't been observed properly in our history and stuff like that. And you can claim and say that, well, it's just a matter of time, right? Those slight adaptations, they build up into massive adaptations and changes and stuff. You just have to think about 1 million years and stuff. And that could be true, but there's still a lot of problems with the conventional theory of evolution that we're always getting taught and sold and stuff, right? Abiogenesis, that's never been observed in modern history, right? Modern history, that life can just spontaneously emerge and become more complex. It's never been observed, right? There's no type of, we can't emulate that, right? Why is it that we cannot recreate those circumstances, right? Although then that would be that wouldn't even prove abiogenesis, because we're ushering in that type of development, right? It wouldn't be like completely isolated on its own, like supposedly at the genesis of our Earth, at the beginning of the Earth's history, when life was just randomly becoming complex for no reason and stuff. And this Harun Yahya, you should really study a lot of his works, because he kind of nails it, right? He kind of perfectly captures why creationism is probably a lot more reasonable, right? Because again, evolution, blind chance, right? Wow, these transitional stages wouldn't have worked out. Any animal, right, that came into a completely new, different, more alien and hostile environment, it would have just died immediately, right? There wouldn't be, in the theory of evolution, they kind of teach you that there was this transition between species, right? And we have these and that's how things changed and adapted and became different. And so, but Harun Yahya was heavily, kind of carefully and perfectly arguing that, right? This transition would have never occurred, right? Any type of animal, imagine it, you can think about it quite easily, right? Let's just say you have like some fish creature, right? You quickly throw it out of its natural habitat and stuff. It's gonna die, man. It's not gonna slowly and carefully adapt its biology. And you could say, well, let's just say that fish creature had a bunch of children. One of their children has this weird genetic quirk where it can kind of handle air. Then fast forward like a couple thousand years, that you can easily see how that fish creature could adapt onto land. And that's completely ridiculous, right? Again, that transition wouldn't be happening to the level we think it would be happening, right? The creature, and it wouldn't be able to just easily transition like that without, unless you kind of assisted it, right? its lungs, like it wouldn't have lungs, right? It would just immediately die. This is what Harun Yahya was talking about. He said that that's why the theory of evolution is kind of impossible. The way where we get taught of, you know, about the theory of evolution. And when I say evolution, right, you know, adaptation is obviously true, right? Different animals do change their biological features to kind of to become more accustomed to their environments, right? You know, polar bears, bears. You know, there has to be some type of common ancestor between these creatures and animals and stuff, right? So you know, that you can say, well, look, there's a proof of evolution here, but I'm talking about the theory of evolution we get taught about, you know, by the academics, by the supposed scientists, right? The theory of evolution that says that, you know, abiogenesis, you know, life can emerge for no reason, from nothing, and become more complex for literally no reason. Isn't that kind of insane and bizarre and not proven in any demonstrable way? And again, let's just say you have a fish creature and stuff. It's attempting to get onto land. You know, we both know that that fish creature will die. And you can argue, well, let's say it has children. One of its children has this weird genetic quirk, and it's able to stay, you know, for a longer time on land. Yeah, but that other fish creature, its biology is still going to fail and still going to die, right? It's kind of hasn't been proven that you can take one animal and put it into a completely different hostile environment, and that animal will stay alive, right? You get any type of fish, right? Even if, you know, any type of fish, take it out of its, you know, out of the fish tank or whatever you have to keep it alive, right? It's going to die. It's not going to slowly develop lungs and become more sophisticated and complex and capable of, you know, surviving on land. It's just going to die. This is what Harun Yahya was talking about. He was claiming and saying that it's impossible for, you know, a species to drastically change and adapt to a completely different environment, right? And again, a lot of people would say, well, it's just a matter of millions of years. Okay, fine, but, you know, still, it hasn't been demonstrated, right? You know, again, you know, any type of person who believes in this type of theory of evolution, right? Get yourself, you know, a collection of fishes and put them in like some type of fish tanks or whatever enclosure that helps them stay alive and stuff. Attempt to kind of make them transition onto some other type of environment and stuff that's not filled with water, and you know, you would be able to see that this type of those fish creatures or fishes that you have, they wouldn't be able to just adapt and change. And you could say, well, that's because the time frame is too small, you know. But if you carefully selected and bred them and scanned their genetics properly and picked the ones that could take in air the most, you would be able to see that it is perfectly reasonable that, you know, fishes could adapt themselves and become something that could, you know, handle land and take in air. It's so ridiculous, right? Again, you would have to. Yeah, it's so stupid. It's never been proven, right? You know, these transitions, right? These transitional stages where species turn into different forms, different species, essentially, right? Never been demonstrated and observed and stuff. These types of, you know, again, fishes, right? Something, because, you know, according to like what the people that believe in the type of theory of evolution were taught all the time, right? They were, you know, a bunch of fish creatures. They came out of the ocean for literally no reason, and they just kind of adapted themselves onto the land, and then they became the ancestors of all modern animals and creatures and whatever. How would that type of animal, right, that early fish creature, you know, immediately the moment it goes onto the land, it would just die. All of its offspring would die. It wouldn't have the genetics built for surviving on land, you know. And you could say, well, it would carefully adapt itself. No, that's ridiculous, right? Get any, you know, go to your local pet shop and get some fishes, right? You know, let's see if you could kind of help them adapt onto the land. Of course, you could say, well, that's ridiculous because that's not the same, right? The conditions were different for, you know, how were the conditions different? Why would these fish creatures slowly adapt and develop the capability to survive on land? It doesn't make any logical sense. Their offspring, they were, you know, because, you know, when you have children, your children, they inherit your genetics, right? And then your children, if they have, like, the genetics don't drastically change, right? You know, like, let's just say you had kids, right? Would you be able to, like, let's just say you had kids, according to the theory of evolution, right? If you threw one of your kids into the ocean, it should be able to kind of perfectly adapt and kind of develop the ability to inhale water. Would that work out? Of course not. Let's just say you kept having grandchildren, it kept endlessly going on into the future generations. Do you believe that your distant descendants would have some type of ability to inhale air, water, not air, because, you know, they would be, you know, assuming you want them to kind of evolve, to adapt and be able to like survive in the ocean. Do you really believe that they would kind of develop some type of ability to like, survive under the ocean and stuff? Let's just keep going forward and forward, forward. All of your descendants, you keep attempting to kind of, put your children, your progeny, your offspring into the ocean. You keep attempting to make them adapt to the ocean and stuff. Do you think that, and even in like 1,000 years, your children would inherit some type of ability, your descendants and stuff? They would inherit some type of ability to kind of survive in the ocean. I don't believe that would ever happen, even in 1,000,000 years, right? Because, that's just again, it's impossible without some type of, genetic modification. And this is likewise, that early fish creature ancestor that, a lot of evolutionary biologists and theorists and, Darwinian people and stuff, people who believe in Darwinism and stuff, they claim, right, that there was this one type of fish creature that's the ancestor of all modern animals and creatures and life forms and etc. This fish creature, for no reason, it came out of the ocean and stuff. It carefully adapted itself onto the land, and it became more sophisticated and complex and capable of surviving on land. And then it just developed into like, all the ancestors of modern land mammals and creatures and other types of life forms and etc. Again, that's never been demonstrated, right? Let's just say you have a bunch of children. Let's just say you have a bunch of children, right? You put all of them in the ocean, right? None of them are going to survive. They're all going to die. Let's just say you kept your descendants and you kept trying to adapt them to like survive under the ocean. It's never going to work. They're all going to die, right? You can see likewise, right? This fish creature that, like, assuming it had children, and some of its children were more capable, they would have all died. They would have not been able to adapt themselves out of the ocean, right? Out of the pond, and become more capable of surviving on land. That type of transition would have never occurred. Likewise, with us, if you have children, you attempted to put them under the ocean, they would all die. Even if you kept having descendants and you kept trying to adapt them and stuff, it would not work out. This drastic transition wouldn't happen, right? This transition that completely alters your biology, and it makes it so that you can survive in some type of new hostile environment. That would have never occurred, right? That's why, the theory of evolution as we're getting taught is a mythology, it's fictional, it's imaginary, it's not factual, it's not truth, it's kind of just made up. Just like as Harun Yahya carefully argues and articulates himself in a lot of his videos and lectures and books and etc. And you should carefully, seriously check out a lot of his work, Harun Yahya's, and kind of maybe read through a lot of his books and literature and stuff.